Welcome to this special edition of Independent Sources. I'm Viano Ravinka.
And I'm Gary Pierre-Pierre. During our first season, Independent Sources producers brought you news, perspectives, and profiles from places as close as Harlem and as far away as the Sahara.
As we prepare to launch our new season, we want to look back and highlight a few of the important stories about the ethnic, immigrant, and independent media we've aired over the past year.
On this edition of Independent Sources, producer Michelle Garcia travels to Africa to report on a group of refugees who understand the necessity of news.
Abi Ishola travels to New Jersey to follow up on some homeless workers who sought a safe haven.
Producer Judith Escalona tells us about a magazine for African-American entrepreneurs, and Anjanette Levert tells us about a lawsuit that posed the question, who is a journalist?
Zyphus Lebrun profiles a radio station for Haitians, and Adeola Oladele profiles a TV program for Harlem.
We'll have those stories right after this.
We are what the historians are going to go back to. And if we do not have those records intact, then we will lose whole histories of communities within our city. You look at the Amsterdam news from any particular week and you look at a daily newspaper from that same week, you'll see two different New Yorks. And to get a true picture of a city, you need to look at their independent press. Because without it, you only get a part of the picture.
When El Diario La Prensa published a piece about a group of day laborers forced to live underneath an abandoned house, it was picked up by news organizations like CNN. The coverage crossed language lines and led to an outpouring of help for the homeless man. Abi Ishola did a follow-up on the man and the response from the media.
Israel Rodriguez's story in America began 5 years ago. He left El Salvador to work in the U.S. to support his family back home. But his plans stalled last fall when he was forced to live beneath the porch of this abandoned house and bathe in the murky waters of the canal next door.
Estaba aquí y nosotros entrábamos allí y nos entrábamos a dormir allí todos juntos.
Rodriguez is one of several Central American immigrants in Plainfield, New Jersey, who fell on hard times when the U.S. economy took a nosedive. Plainfield's unemployment rate is up over 2% from last fall, making it one of the highest in Central Jersey. Jobs are scarce for day laborers like Rodriguez, so many have been forced to move into small holes scattered across the city. The living conditions here were so awful, it earned the name Cueva del Diablo, or Devil's Cave.
Era muy triste porque allí aguantábamos frío, hambre y a veces íbamos a los containers a sacar para comer.
¿Va a trabajar?
Carmen Salavierta, a volunteer who advocates for day laborers in the community, found out about Devil's Cave and acted immediately. She contacted politicians, community workers, and El Diario La Prensa, one of the largest daily newspapers serving the Hispanic community.
El Diario has been really working with the community for many years. Like they really, any problems come up, they're always there to be exposed to what is happening.
Devil's Cave became a front-page story for El Diario in January. Eva Sanchez, the Metro News editor for the paper, says the story highlights a critical issue in ethnic communities.
I think for us it's very important to see the impact that the economic crisis is having on the most vulnerable population, such as Hispanic immigrant workers and day laborers and undocumented workers.
Several news outlets, including CNN, later followed El Diario's lead. How does that make you feel to know that people are picking up from small community papers and taking them to mainstream media?
It's just like so rewarding for us because it's our community, and basically I think our goal is to have a voice for these people, you know, who don't have a voice.
Many who felt connected to the coverage on Devil's Cave were moved to action.
And from there, a lot of people call and they want to help. They want to know what they can do, how they can give us a hand.
She used those donations to rent this small basement apartment for Rodriguez and 4 other men from Devil's Cave. She manages to round up monthly donations to cover their rent.
This March is not paying yet. I still have $300 left to pay, so I have to put it together. But I know it's going to come, and people help, but they're very good.
Rodriguez, who recently started a steady job, can now lend a hand to maintain the place he now calls home.
En la cueva no, ni por cerca.
So the case was not even near the way it is here now. So
he's thankful to members of the community and the media for his second chance in America. Abi Ishola for Independent Sources.
Gracias a Dios, a Carmencita y a todos ustedes.
You promised me the world. Is this what you had in mind?
Every choice we make has a consequence. Help EarthShare and its members restore balance to the world. Visit earthshare.org and see what you can do. EarthShare, one environment, one simple way to care for it.
The International Sahara Film Festival is a project to raise awareness about the plight of refugees from a former Spanish colony, the Western Sahara. The festival is sponsored by a rebel movement seeking the independence of the Western Sahara from Morocco. Michelle Garcia traveled to the desert and found that in this North Africa territory, news is a necessity.
نبغي هواك يرد الحنين.
This is Northern Africa, on the very edge of Algeria, in the Sahara Desert. Scattered across 5 camps live the Sahari refugees. This camp is named Tahba, the most remote, the most isolated, and usually the quietest. Until the artists and the foreigners rolled into town, and more tents went up, and the desert became a movie theater, the site of the Sahara Film Festival.
What if recent United States efforts to
4 nights watching movies under the African sky, Algerian films, documentaries, even Hollywood's biopic on Che Guevara. By day, documentary makers, volunteers from Spain, teach mostly young women the ropes of video production. Moilami wants to work behind the mic.
Para que la gente sepa de nosotros y que todo el mundo esté al tanto de lo que ocurre en los campamentos y que somos un pueblo. Quizás hay muchos pueblos que ni siquiera saben lo que es el Sahara, ni saben nuestra situación política, ni saben nada acerca de nosotros.
They are the refugees from Western Sahara, in these camps since the 1970s, when war broke out between the invading Moroccan army and independence fighters, the Polisario Front. A ceasefire came with a UN-backed promise that the Sahari would vote on their future, become part of Morocco or an independent nation. That was 18 years ago, and still no vote. I ask her if she ever wakes up and wonders if the world has forgotten them.
A veces, claro, a veces nos preguntamos pero Dios es el que controla todo y es el que decide todo. Y nosotros tenemos mucha fe en Dios y sabemos que Dios algún día va... Nunca, bueno, la gente puede olvidarse de nosotros, pero Dios nunca se olvida de nosotros.
But they do their part, she says, reporting the news even from the middle of the desert.
Sí, estamos viviendo en el campamento, pero tenemos noticias. Por ejemplo, el Festival de Cine es una noticia y también muy interesante que hay que llevarla a cabo. No es porque estemos viviendo en los campamentos, no podemos tener radio, no podemos tener televisión porque aunque estés viviendo en un desierto, hay noticias. Por ejemplo, ha pasado un pájaro hoy, entonces hay vida. Por ejemplo, donde hay vida hay noticias.
Her words remind me of something so fundamental, something we all share, whether in New York City or in the Sahara Desert. The news is really about making sure people aren't forgotten.
الفنانين
For Independent Sources, I'm Michelle Garcia.
Africa is also the focus of a magazine for African American entrepreneurs. Network Journal targets African American professionals and business owners with an eye towards establishing connections with the continent. Judith Escalona reported the story.
What corporate America really thinks of Africa. You see, they've never done anything like this. I've been following the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for the longest while, since the 1980s when I started as a professional journalist, and I've never seen them do anything like this. This is exactly what we were saying. Africa is hot, and not hot as a place for aid and charity, but for business and investment.
Rosalind McClymont has been bullish about Africa since she traveled to the Congo as a young financial reporter in the 1970s. As editor-in-chief of the Network Journal, she continues to push for African Americans to become more involved in Africa through investment, entrepreneurial ventures, and employment. Since its founding 15 years ago, the Network Journal has been reporting on African American-owned enterprises and professionals who are at the top of their game. The monthly glossy features personal profiles, economic trends, political analyses, and opportunities for the black professional and business owner.
We have no competitor. This is a niche that we have moved into. Our circulation is we're moving towards 30,000 paid circulation. Our readership is over 80,000.
Their website, tnj.com, expands their reach and offers additional articles and videos not found in the magazine. The Network Journal has also entered the publishing arena, recently releasing Africa Strictly Business, a compilation of articles written by McClymont while she worked as a correspondent based in Africa.
The more I went back into those Africa-focused columns and those trading with Africa columns that reports that I did for Shipping Digest, the more I saw a chronicling of Africa's own initiatives in terms of developing itself. And you don't hear about this. You hear about these, drugs that are being created by the major pharmaceutical companies, and they're not being delivered, and all sorts of things. It's always the external Tarzan who comes in with some sort of, if it's not aid, then a cure or, technology. You never hear about what's being developed there, and it is happening. So this is what Africa Strictly Business is about. This is what Dambisa Moyo's book is about.
McClymont is referring to Dambisa Moyo's controversial book, Dead Aid, that calls for an end to aid to Africa. According to Moyo, aid has damaged the political and economic development of the continent. Africa, for McClymont, is an economic powerhouse in the making, once freed of the shackles of aid and the negative images of the dark continent. For Independent Sources, I'm Judith Escalona.
We'll be right back.
As you know, paper comes from trees.
Paper comes from trees.
Paper comes from trees. Every time trees are destroyed to make paper, we lose something that can't be replaced.
We lose the air we breathe,
the soil that grows our food, wildlife, and our home.
And their home.
You have the power to stop this.
You have the power to stop this.
You have the power to stop this. Insist that the paper you buy is tree-free. Insist on it.
Insist on it.
Help us win the paper campaign.
The question of who is a journalist was at the center of a lawsuit 3 men filed against the New York City Police Department when they were denied press credentials. Producer Anjanette Levert talked to the plaintiffs.
Longtime City Hall gadfly Rafael Martinez-Alequin has more than 25 years working as a journalist. And for more than 15 years, he has carried a working press card.
Suddenly, you know, in 2007, they changed everything here. Before, we used to go, bring 3 articles that have been written within the year, a letter from the publisher, in that case was me, they would take a photograph and issue instantly the press credential to everybody.
But last year, the NYPD started requiring journalists to make appointments to receive their credentials.
I went there and then they denied my press credential.
Mr. Alequin is suing the NYPD to have his credentials reinstated. He believes he has received this treatment because of the tough questions he asked Mayor Bloomberg.
This mayor, who is a media mogul, the reason he denied it to me because I do ask questions pertaining to the policy that is made in this city that affect the poor people in the community, whether they be Afro-American, Puerto Rican, the other Latinos or Afro or Asian.
Alequin is not alone in his lawsuit. He is joined by Ralph E. Smith, publisher of the Guardian Chronicle, and by David Wallace, the founder of featurewell.com. They also were denied working press credentials in 2007 without explanation. The city's law department issued a statement saying, the issuance of NYPD press passes strikes an appropriate balance between First Amendment concerns and public safety. Their lawsuit asserts that the system for issuing press credentials is inconsistent and constitutionally flawed. That same opinion is also held by the immigrant and ethnic media. Last September, New York Community Media Alliance and the NYPD met. Deputy Commissioner for Public Information, Paul Browne, floated the idea of the NYPD getting out of the press pass business.
What would you think of our just getting out of the business entirely? Of press credentials, license plates, everything. We're out of it. And we're just going to close a crime scene based purely on investigative need. And then reporters, you know, you're from a big newspaper, you're a little newspaper, you're from a website, doesn't make any difference. You're just like anybody else.
For now, Alequin's concern is that the press card is needed for more than just crime scenes, and it is access that he's fighting for.
But the lawsuit is not about Rafael Martinez-Alequin or Ralph Smith or David Wallace. More important than that is the denier of the freedom of the press, the denier of the right on the First Amendment to journalists.
Anjanette Levert for Independent Sources.
The men won their case and were given press credentials. We'll be right back after this.
Journalism is about telling stories, true stories about real people. And in my experience, real life is far more compelling than fiction. I'm Linda Proud, and I've been a journalist for 25 years and a teacher of journalism for 16. There are many ways to tell a story. I started in radio, moved to television, then to print, but I was drawn back to broadcasting. Maybe that's because I come from a tradition of oral storytelling. I've traveled and worked all over the world, and similar traditions exist everywhere. people passing on stories about the events of the day, about events in their lives. And that's what broadcast journalism does, albeit in a more structured way. Radio is still how many people first learn about the stories of the day, whether it's a New Yorker tuning into all news radio, or a farmer in Haiti who has access to news only via radio. Combine images with the spoken word, and television can sometimes transcend language and cultural barriers. So I teach students to write stories, and the operative word is write. Write stories that truly and clearly speak to people, whether the story has the brevity of breaking news or the depth of a documentary. You'll learn this at the CUNY J School, from experienced professors and from professionals from the industry. And you'll learn this in New York, home to dozens of commercial, community, and cable stations. So if you're serious about broadcast journalism, this should speak to you.
We end our show with two profiles. In the first, Zyphus Lebrun visits Radio Soleil, a station that has become a lifeline for Haitians here to events back home. In the second, Adeola Oladele visits a production company in Harlem with a mission: to let everyone know that the historic black neighborhood is still here.
A quick goodbye to his wife, and Pierre Cime is off to work, his trusty transistor radio in hand. Despite having a working radio in his cab, Cime carries his 13-year-old tape deck because it's the only way he can listen to his favorite station, Radio Soleil.
If New York City have 500,000 Haitians or a million, maybe 90% will listen to Radio Soleil.
Radio Soleil d'Haïti, il fait exactement midi et 10 minutes. Nous en contact direct avec Haïti, et le pays qui vit une partie grave de sa vie politique.
Soleil opened in 1991 and is one of the 7 Haitian radio stations in New York. Senior reporter and general manager Ricot Dupuy has been with Soleil since its first broadcast, covering news from Haiti and here in the United States that the mainstream press does not.
Haitians live for news because this is a country that has been in turmoil for the longest time. I mean, they live their life with the constant hope that they come home from work and they turn on the station, they will hear some positive news.
Et je dis à nous tendre situation, c'est des irrégularités de toutes sortes. Le vote est certainement massif.
We could give you news from the world news, like Ted Koppel, like Ted Koppel, like Peter Jenny, like that.
Cime is one of the many Haitians in New York who rely on low-frequency stations like Radio Soleil for their news. This continues a practice started in Haiti during the transistor revolution of the 80s. It was a time when Haitian journalists broadcast over a pirated signal in their native Creole, rather than the elitist French programming sponsored by the Duvalier government.
The press was not free, and the government was very suspicious of people that were listening to the press, specific to newscasts. But the people started to challenge this state of affairs, so people started really to invest, to save the money, to buy a receiver. And buying a receiver means it's a door to freedom.
Freedom Cime continues to enjoy every day as he listens to news and his favorite music, Zouk and Kadas.
Oh, this is Zouk. This is Zouk from Martinique. You get news from your country? That's your mother. Yep, you listen to your mother every morning.
In spite of such kudos, Radio Soleil struggles to stay alive. Much of the overhead is paid through community businesses, advertising over the station, and religious groups who pay for airtime.
It's a struggle. It's commercial, but the objective is really to help the community. So a lot of times you end up expending energies that does not reward you in financial terms, but reward you so much in other ways.
Driving through Harlem, one may not easily notice a new newsroom known as Still Here, located on 138th Street on the west side. The two-room office is run by 4 men who train themselves in the art of journalism. Their motto is giving a voice to the voiceless. They do that by covering the politics, sports, and all happenings in Harlem.
I started Still Here Harlem production with the intention of creating a miniature CNN for Harlem.
The founder, Joseph Hayden, is popularly known as Jazz. The 68-year-old was not always a model citizen. Hayden earned a bachelor's from SUNY Newport and a master's from New York Theological Seminary while he was an inmate in New York State Prison.
My story is one of overcoming obstacles, you know. Like I got kicked out of school when I was in the first grade. I ended up getting kicked out of every school I ever went to. But I've been a criminal, I've been an athlete, I've been a musician, I've been an organizer.
The great-grandfather says he got the name Still Here from watching the movie Papillon. The movie starred Steve McQueen as a criminal who escapes an island prison after several attempts.
But the phrase also applies to survivors all over the world, whether it's from natural disasters or personal problems or whatever it is. If you survive it, you're still here.
Hayden says he opened the newsroom last year with his savings and donations from a friend, a total of $40,000. He explained that it's because the mainstream media is only focusing on the upper class and not on the local people.
But nobody looked down at the base of the pyramid. You know, nobody looked at the Harlems of America. Nobody asked their opinion.
Still Here gained national recognition after covering a mass rally against what critics called a racist cartoon published by the New York Post in February. The video made it to CNN's website, attracting 10,000 clicks that night. Now the newsroom is attracting younger people like 27-year-old Paulo Walker, who works there full-time.
I could probably get a free internship where maybe I'd be getting coffee for people or doing some menial tasks, but here I can come in and have access to great equipment. Also, I have a great personal relationship with Jazz, who I've learned a lot from, you know, personally and also in the business sense as well.
Still Here produces a weekly show on Manhattan Neighborhood Network called All Things Harlem. The production company is also in the process of partnering with other local media to survive these tough economic times. The staff at Still Here are hoping that media like this, focusing on the local people, will continue to spring up all over the U.S. in the nearest future. For independent sources, I'm Adeola Oladele.
What we try to do with the show is basically to give tools to the Hispanic community for them to live a better life in the United States, whether if it's education, health, immigration, public affairs shows, also culture. We give them every day, you know, from Monday through Friday, different shows that they can participate and voice their opinions and concerns.
That's our show. Thanks for watching and join us next week for the premiere of our second season.
We'll continue to bring you news and views from the ethnic, immigrant, and community media.
Until then, be independent-minded.